Hi, and welcome back to It Takes a Village. I'm Reverend Dr. Jenny Schultz-Thomas, and I am joined with my colleague and friend, Reverend Sarah Rental-Jones. We are excited to be with you today. There's so much happening, as always, in the life of our community and our personal lives and the wider community and the story that we're a part of. We really wanted to talk today about gratitude. And you hear a lot about this. I remember there was this season maybe 10 years ago in the school system where it was sort of this focus on grit and resiliency. And then there's a big gratitude movement. Maybe it was Brene Brown, like writing all the books, but gratitude essentially touches all of our sacred stories, right, across traditions. And it really is sort of the ethos of the human story. We are here to kind of give back and support and to love each other and the earth. And so giving gratitude and showing thanksgiving allows us to continue in that work. So we are right now at a time of intense division in society, lots of struggles around who we are and our identities. And so we thought, as we enter this season of gratitude and thanksgiving, it would be nice to just name some places that maybe we feel a little bit hopeless, but gratitude can help us find that resilience and hope that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's such a good practice for true self-care, as we might be in different states of mind following the election, following, news reports that we see every day. Gratitude can help to really deeply allow us to know that we are here in this moment, to look around and to see things that we can appreciate. I think sometimes I have a friend who, she's hilarious and she doesn't like gratitude, but we make a joke of it. But sometimes we have to use synonyms. So it's like, well, what do you appreciate, right? And so as we continue to talk about gratitude, we're going to flesh out, how to look at it from different angles so that it feels relevant and fresh and meaningful for us.
Yeah, that's great. I love that because, when you just sort of throw out, ooh, it's a season of gratitude, it sort of feel like a hogwash Hallmark card, right? Let's just be thankful for what we have. So I think grounding it in our own personal stories and what we know, the depths of our sacred religious traditions can guide us around this community spirit that focuses on gratitude. I think it builds this resilience, this grit, and really changes our minds. One of the things that I love science, and so I love always, what does the scientific community have to say about this thing that we know, right? We know in our hearts, we know in our spirits. And there are so many studies that show that people who choose gratitude and who actively have a discipline of utilizing gratitude as a force changes the human brain. I was doing some research on this and found this really cool study. It was based on 300 college students. And one of the questions was, well, okay, yeah, gratitude, right? Sure, let's just be thankful. But if you're already in a place of struggling with grief or loss or just the context of, hopelessness that some people feel right now, even in this election season, can gratitude really shift the dial? And so they did this study on this college campus with these 300 students who were already naming, I'm in a difficult place, just grief, loss, sadness, depression, all those things around mental health. And in fact, gratitude out of those 300 was a proven tool that shifted their brain chemistry, right? Allowed them to, one of the things was around toxic emotions, right? When you started journaling or using gratitude, words that were positive, connected to other humans and to yourself, they dwelt less on negative self emotions and words to describe the now. And so that's a lot. Just, it can be hard to dig yourself out of a bad day, right? But if a bad day turns into a lot of bad days, those negative emotions that you are self-inflicting on, maybe when you look in the mirror, it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And so I think there are so many studies around gratitude and the science around choosing positivity in terms of I see myself as an agent for change in my own circumstances and in maybe someone else's just for today. That's, I think, very promising for us as we look for our own places of honest gratitude with integrity. How do I love myself and how do I love my neighbor?
Yeah, and I think it helps us to really be more aware of all the gifts that we have, all the people who are part of our network. Even thinking about, I was talking to someone yesterday about ordering things on an app, and how that can go sideways if things get wrong are done wrong. But it can also be you order on an app, but then you have an exchange with a person when you receive, your coffee or your meal or whatever the case may be. And you have the chance to say, like, thank you. Yes, it's their job, but they still did it and they did it well. And you can appreciate that you are being handed the coffee that gets your morning going, right? And saying thank you. And so it can be a way that we, in moments of uncertainty, can find some peace in expressing gratitude for what is all around us. Whether it's our family, our pets, the communications that we have with friends, whether near or far. I was thinking yesterday how when we got home and Irene went in our house and our dogs just went nuts. So excited to see her. Yeah. But it's like, well, you appreciate and are grateful for their presence. And like, look at these two little beings who are so happy to see you after you've been away at school all day, and appreciate that. And of course, they don't necessarily know if you're saying thank you to them.
Exactly.
But it raises your spirits to be, they're grateful for you, obviously, by their behavior and their joy.
So yes, it's like the simple things and noticing all around what's already there.
Yes.
Right. The person bringing the coffee, they're going to come anyway and bring it. You paid for it. They're going to leave it on the porch. They're going to knock on the door. The opportunity to recognize the person and the exchange and to say thank you, that changes that person's experience and yours. Recognizing that the dogs, that joy that they're, and letting that resonate and kind of, seep into your soul. It's kind of you could either ignore it as like, oh yeah, the dogs, they're always barking when I come in, they're excited to see me, or being present in the moment really can shift, again, that how you're feeling, right? And the emotions, but also the receptivity you have to gratitude shifts your focus and the paradigm of less or more. This reminds me of one of my recent favorite books, The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. I mean, just the book is so amazing. Of course, read the book if you haven't and you're listening today. But there's a quote in here by the Dalai Lama: gratitude helps us realize that we have enough. I mean, when you walk in and I'm the dogs, right? My last dog, Oliver, you walk in, the dog loves you, the dog's jumping, is so excited every single time. That is enough, right? The kids might be like, Mom, where's my candy? Where's my shoe? Sage is hitting me. But the dog, love you. I'm so happy to see you. You're amazing, right? That we have enough. I think understanding and naming the complexity with which this particular book or this particular context is speaking to the depths of our human experience out of complete nothingness, out of obliteration of an entire community, right? Coming out of apartheid, Desmond Tutu is writing from so many different contexts maybe that are unfamiliar to us. But knowing that as human beings, we have enough if we are living into the depths of all that we are, right? I think the saddest part there is that we also have human beings have created the barriers where people don't feel that they themselves are enough, let alone have enough.
Right.
It's our humanity. We are amazing and wonderful and beloved just as we are.
Yeah.
And that is enough, more than enough. But we've created such a false narrative around what it means to exist as a human. We have put barriers, we've put hierarchies around, privileged around what it means to show up in your own skin.
Right.
So I think the choice and the flip side is saying, knowing that I'm enough means that you're enough. We can show up with gratitude for those in our lives who just need to know today. Thank you so much for bringing that coffee. You're awesome. It's a rainy day and you walked all the way up the porch. Thank you. Right? It's so powerful. If only we knew what we already have, this deep power to change the world. Based on how we choose to show up. Oh, it's such a gift. It's a hard way to see scarcity turn into abundance.
Well, and I think too, like letting ourselves believe that we are enough, right? Like I think that's something that our culture and our society is always trying to take from us. And sometimes we've been also groomed in that way by our families to think there's always something we can be working on. I remember my dad saying one time, like I had a 97% on a test. Where'd the other 3 points go? And I adore my dad,
of course,
right? But it's like that kind of thinking all the time of like, you're excellent, but could you be better? And so it's like not to overstate the thing with the dogs, but it's like letting yourself believe like they really love you.
They really love you.
They're so happy to see you because they really love you because you are so lovable and because you have this great connection with them, right? Like your kids are so happy to see you because because they love you, because you connect with them and they feel seen by you and they want to connect with you. Like that's a big deal that they run into the room and they want to hug you and they want to jump in your lap, right? It could be otherwise. Like I think that sometimes. And so I think letting ourselves believe that, like that helps to strengthen us, that we actually are stronger to then do whatever we feel called to do as sort of like our justice work. If we are coming from this place of enoughness, then if we're always kind of trying to prove something, you know, I think that we can just really trust, like when someone pays you a compliment, like believe it, let that be true about you.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. And, you know, as we think about choosing gratitude and hopefulness and thankfulness, like these are disciplines, right? But the discipline of the receptivity, right? That's also a discipline. But gosh, yes. I mean, I think about this striving culture that we created where, I mean, I can be that person to myself, like, oh, well, where's that A++? Or why didn't you finish first? Or why weren't you the fastest? Whatever the thing is. And you have to understand like that for all of us, that's an erosion of what we were created for, right? If we think of, you know, worship, our worshiping selves, or to edify one another, but really that our existence was to reflect back onto, right, who created us, the creator, the world that is the universe that is holding things, right? If we are to be just our existence, right, this deep reflection of this beauty and wholeness, and it's like we just took that and a hammer and started chinking away at it from day one, and here we are now. I think each and every day is an opportunity to say, well, how do I pick all those pieces up and put them back together, and how do I make sure that whoever's holding a hammer does not, you know, they do not have room in this space. They do not have room in this community. I mean, I think that's a hard thing about, as we talk about gratitude and resiliency, I think they're two sides of the same coin. Because to show gratitude, to show this deep sort of whatever's radiating from our souls that is giving back and edifying another human being, or the soul of the earth, it also means putting up, you know, a wall for like what's not gratitude. That is not, we're not going to receive that. So receptivity, making sure that we have good boundaries around what I will receive, right? So I think that overflow of gratitude and thanksgiving and the depths of our souls, you know, pouring out to others also requires us to know what we're bringing in. And we mostly, I think, you know, in our culture have told children or those in, you know, focused on academia or excellence that, you know, critique, right, will then help them evolve, growth, right? So receive all of that and then grow and be better. Receive all of it. But we don't really talk about or, you know, create society where we can curate this receptivity to all the good things, right? To this hopefulness, to you are beautiful, you are whole, you are amazing just as you are.
Right.
So how do we do that? And how do we really shape this paradigm shift from one of understanding excellence as achievement, right, to excellence as a whole, full self, right, that radiates beauty and joy rather than, please tell me how I can do better.
Right.
Oh, it's just, yeah, it's infuriating when you think about the fact that I'm thinking myself, like I've been a part of that cycle, right? Do better, achieve more, and also continue to be deeply rooted in the spirit work of the refining fire of your soul, right? And they're kind of not, they don't talk to each other often in our culture, right?
Right.
It's hard.
It is. Well, we have a great quote that you shared from theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer in thinking about how gratitude can exist even in the darkest times.
Yes.
And he spent some time in prison and famously said, in ordinary life, we hardly realize that we receive a great deal more than we give, and that it is only with gratitude that life becomes rich. And I think that really ties in to me with what we were just talking about with enoughness and with being enough and being rich, not necessarily in material goods, but in our spirits and in our faith and in our relationships. I think those are some ways that gratitude can really show us that we have so much. I mean, and really we do. A lot of us in this community have a great deal, and yet, you know, our society will make us think that we still need more and more and more.
Yes.
And you know, we have some of these amazing quotes that really came from people who were undergoing great trials and then gave us these real pearls of wisdom. I just think of so many, I mean, even St. Paul, right, writing from prison. So many of our great thinkers who were imprisoned, and how much our lives are so much more comfortable than that. And yet we can maybe struggle to reach for these practices of gratitude that can help us to refocus. And I think sometimes during the darkest times, we have to reach for that, or else we will just completely fall into despair, which is maybe why some of these beautiful quotes and teachings come to us from people who have had so much stripped away from them.
Oh gosh, I think that's such a, I've been thinking about this, these days, where post-election, my own personal experience is one of, trying to choose the power in the now of hopefulness and look at these teachings, of Jesus, of our texts, of deep spiritual thinkers who have lived desperate hardships out of nothing, right? We have everything. And so in this moment where we think of nothingness and enoughness, there's this light and this dark experience that we are consistently comparing, right? Well, this person had it so much worse. And so I probably, I need to either not share my own hardship or experience, or these people are sharing their grief and hardship out of a place of privilege, out of a place of, I'm not sure there's been a dark day. If you think of Nelson Mandela writing from prison, St. Paul writing from prison, Bonhoeffer, Desmond Tutu speaking out of apartheid. There are so many places where the desperate story of humanity reaches out, and what lingers for us in post-societies where those war-torn countries and these leaders have written and shared their stories is the hopefulness, the light that they are somehow able to hold and harness that stretches generations of pain and suffering. And we're in this cycle of pain and suffering. And so today we find ourselves in just a landscape that looks uncertain, right? We're still one of the greatest countries in the world with the most opportunities and the most beneficial policies and governance. And yet we also are torn based on different ideological reasons, different faith dispositions, different struggles of hierarchy and understanding how much or who should lead and how much power they should have. And so if we find ourselves in this desperate place, right, knowing that we still have kind of everything we need, right? You think of Paul writing, I write to you, brothers and sisters, that you have everything that you need for life. That's the same kind of text that the Dalai Lama is sharing. We have everything we need, but maybe the goal in finding ourselves despondent, some of us, is not to think about, well, someone else's situation might be worse or harder, or someone else's might be this. It might be, what collectively do we share that can move us from this place of hopelessness to a place of resilience, and then resistance that is defiant hope. The resistance of God's love, it says that I'm going to love anyway. I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep loving you and bringing hope into this situation, even while, right, I'm in prison, all of my people have been slaughtered, whether it's genocide or something else. This hopefulness that radiates across generations and suffering and war-torn experiences is the one that we as Christians continue to point to. The light of Christ, the love of God that shines, right, even in the darkness. Yeah, it's so interesting that so many of our great thinkers and those who continue to bring light, right, to the narrative of loss and hopelessness are those who have written or experienced out of deep harm, like tragedy, suffering, the likes that we hope to never see again, right? War-torn communities, genocide, whether it's Desmond Tutu on the landscape of an apartheid division where there's real pain and suffering and loss of life, or Nelson Mandela, right, writing from prison. It's Bonhoeffer. I think what's important about that is knowing that from suffering, we continue to have these voices of resilient hope, defiant hope, that are meaningful and that are sort of this fodder for finding our own resilience that then turns to active resistance, which I think is important for us in this moment, because the gospel is completely a form of active resistance. Loving your neighbor, even though the world says your neighbor should be deported. Loving your neighbor, even though your neighbor's skin color tells this community they're lesser than a human, right? So if we think of gratitude as a means of refining that hopefulness, taking the hopefulness of someone who's maybe in a position that, in a context where their lives were at stake, and maybe our privileged white lives are not at stake to the same degree. But instead of over identifying with that pain and suffering, we channel that hope and see it as our own, because across generations, hopefulness touches all means of suffering. And if we find that defiant hope, then we can turn that defiant hope into our formal act of resistance, which is the call of the gospel, right? And so if gratitude, as white privileged people, can be the language, right, that we speak, and then we can embody to move us to a place of over-identification with suffering, to maybe mobilizing on behalf of the world who is suffering and who is facing who knows what kind of harm and threat to their own livelihoods, then we can be the voice of hope for all the world looking on in generations to come.
Yeah, and I know we've talked here as staff and as leaders that, there are so many who are already doing such work, and that we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. We need, in a lot of ways, to fall in line and to be the hands and feet for some of the ideas that people have already developed. People who have been living under constant threat in their own identity, in their own personhood, in whether or not this country supports who they are, whether they're people of color, whether they're trans or queer or whoever is in a position of real risk. And so for those of us who have always wanted to kind of optimize our lives and think that, well, what we really want is our lives to keep getting better and better, but it's really coming out of a place of privilege. And I know, I admit that, like, I don't want to suffer. None of us wants to suffer, but we have so much. And so thinking about, yes, we have fear of our livelihoods being threatened, and that may cause us some suffering, but there are folks who have been suffering and still are clear-minded, clear-headed, seeing the road ahead. How can we learn from them, follow where they've been trying to lead us, and we've been saying, like, oh no, we know better. But now we can be part of the community that is willing to do it scared, and move forward. And we do need to really take very good care of ourselves in order to do that.
Yeah, I think that's so great to name that there are voices, there are leaders, there are women of color who've been doing this work, the work of owning your humanity against the landscape that has already called you second-class citizen, right? There are things like that we know of, they're a part of our history, but they are part of everyday life, right, for so many people in this country, this land of the free. So how do we then say, with gratitude for what I have, I'm going to then express my own disposition by supporting you, by standing in line, by going and supporting Black-owned businesses, by finding places that I can move my hopelessness to a place of active resistance. I think naming that there are already people doing that is the first step. The second is to understand, what is my role in that, right? Because not everyone is a person of great privilege. Many of us are listening and probably tuning into this podcast or a part of this community. Where are those in our community who might not have that identity, but who need a space to speak, and a space to be 100% present without having to answer, all the white people questions, without having to, but knowing that we have work to do means that we need to create space to kind of turn I think sometimes there's this, white fragility about, wow, my pain and suffering is top of mind because we centralize the white human story, in this context. So how do I move and know that I also need help and need support and have suffering, and take care of myself in a way that then calls me to be able, right, to stand in line, to be able to then support those who need us, right? I think there's so much work to do as white people alone, white people of faith, and then people, right? All of us are burdened by different kinds of experiences that we have. And I think too, like we were talking earlier about not over projecting onto tomorrow what we can only control today, right? And that's, how do we respond to stress and fear and anxiety today? I mean, what are some practices, right, that we can attend to so that we are prepared if and when ready or needed, we can take active steps to support others.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes when we really can be spinning out and being in our heads and very worried and projecting into the future, that it can be so helpful to try to get back in our bodies. And for so many of us, we hardly even know what that means. But just as you were talking about the brain science before, we know about the ways in which our central nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system needs to kind of have these de-stressing responses, and it takes discipline, it takes practice and presence to be able to do that. And that is part of, when I think about like really deep self-care, that is literally caring for ourselves, for our bodies, in thinking about those practices of, whether it's trying to, work with the vagus nerve, all kind of things that we can't really teach here today, but that are available as somatic practices that you can look up. One of my friend taught me to like imagine like an oval shape right around your, like in your belly button area, and then imagine yourself flattening it. And it's so relaxing to do that, just to sit and do that for a few minutes. I mean, it takes awareness and intention. So in some ways it gets you from thinking about all these, news headlines that are freaking you out to thinking about, okay, if this, I got to smush this oval. But it really does like help your body. You can just almost like feel your body release some of the stress and get to have some of the good hormones, lowering the cortisol level and being able to release the good hormones that you want to kind of flood your system.
Yes. And, just this week during our staff retreat, Dan started us out by introducing us to the 8 different forms of yoga practice, right? Acknowledging that only one or two of them are the kinds of yoga that most of us understand as yoga practice, but most of them across the world are practiced around breathing and non-physical movements whatsoever, but the breathing and the connection to your environment, which is resisting it and focusing on one thing that brings you to the now, right? So there are so many ways to do that, but most of us don't add the squishing of the oval into our everyday practice, but we should. It sounds like a great thing. So many practices. So we also we're called as a community to practice, right? This discipline of finding gratitude, finding our place in the human story that can be an effusive presence of love, of God's love. So how do we do these things in community? There's a great quote by Brene Brown. She says, what separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude. So how do we as a collective community separate our privilege from entitlement and then call it gratitude, right? So privilege and entitlement, what separates privilege from entitlement is gratitude. So if that's true, the great equalizer, right, across the human story, across these different categories that we have named as human 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? If gratitude is that great equalizer, it should be that we can show up in any place, at any time, in a context that at least that we're familiar with. And if we practice true, honest, deep gratitude, then we would be able to have some kind of shared commonality with those in the room. I know that might sound like a Hopi, proverb book, like a 5-pager, a board book. Let's just show up and have stone soup and everything's okay now. But I think if we understand the real definition of gratitude, then that would be true, right? You can't actually have honest, deep gratitude without first understanding the differentiation of context the landscape that we have already created. To show gratitude to someone else or for someone else is not like empty platitudes. Oh, thank you so much, bye, see you later. So gratitude moves something from my human spirit to yours. It's an energy that actively can transform someone else's experience. And I think that is such a beautiful, simple task that it could be our yoga our practice could be. Think, 5 times today, I am going to practice deep, honest gratitude. And I'm going to have the discipline of integrity surrounding my experiences. Where when I show up, where I'm present, I'm going to deeply be in the now so that I might understand and receive someone else's presence, right? Someone else standing in line beside you. Is there a way to show gratitude for that person? Well, maybe, you're in a tight line in Chipotle and you're like moving around and people are, and it's just, moving back so that they have space, or moving over, or they drop something on the ground and you pick it up. I think those things are small if you just isolate them. But showing deep gratitude in community, right? If we were all practicing that instead of like someone bumps you and you call them a B word and like, well, what the heck, you know, things like that, those really can change the ethos of an entire community, entire room. And that might be like our simple task in this season, to just say, I'm going to be attentive to my own soul so that what flows over and out from me is going to be honest and kind. And if there's an opportunity to show intentional gratitude, then I'm not going to hesitate.
Right.
And maybe I'll hold back on the road rage, like,
Right.
or whatever it is that we are reactionary to. I mean, collective gratitude, it can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it can start by, you know, even giving ourselves assignments that can feel artificial at first, but then can help to be a practice, because we kind of get them into a routine for ourselves. You know, like you were talking about, if you're standing near a stranger, I mean, you can compliment something.
Say,
you know, I love your, exactly. And that really builds connection. And I mean, I don't ever want to encourage people to make something up that's truly not true. Like if you like hate their purse, don't say you love it.
Your purse with a like fake grin.
Right. But if you can find, I mean, but I love that we've read David Brooks's book together already, because it's like the noticing, right? I'm sure you can notice something that you can be able to genuinely say, that is a really cool pair of earrings. Like, I really love them. Yeah. You know, something that we can see about someone else. And I think kids are so great at this. Yes. Like when they're always looking, they're noticing, and they may be like, I love your shoes.
That's right.
You know, and it's just a way that we're present with each other. And I would invite people too, like, I just think of Sunday mornings, you know, we get the privilege of standing up front at different times and being able to look out at everybody. But it's like imagining all the people that come and sit in these pews. Like, I often say to people, and I really mean it, like, I'm so glad you're here.
Yes.
You know, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of our community and our congregation. And, you know, what if we plan to show up at church on Sunday morning and say, you know, look for someone we've not seen before, maybe, and say, like, I'm so glad you're here.
Right.
You know, thank you for being here.
Yes.
And really noticing each other in community. So I think that strengthens us as a community, and helps us not just feel entitled to sit in this beautiful sanctuary with a lot of people and feel a sense of spirit. Like, we are entitled to that. We deserve to have that experience, but to let that overflow into gratitude, that, you know, how lucky are we to have this time with each other and to be in this space with people who are here for the same reason we are.
Yes.
And to let each other know that and appreciate each other for it.
Well, and I think it means so much when someone says, even if you're, you know, on the introverted side or something, maybe even especially, if someone says to you, maybe you're new or you're not new and you've been coming, and they say, I'm so glad you're here. You know, I'm Jenny. Nice to meet you. Even just, hey, you want to get a cup of coffee or not? Even just, I'm so glad you're here. Hope you're having a great week. It pauses like the normal routine where you kind of feel like sometimes I think there's this isolationist understanding that the more I'm struggling or the more I have my own thoughts and wonder what else people are thinking, I want to be this anonymous little person. I want to go to Target and have to not talk to me. I'm going to go get my coffee. And we have created and crafted our lives in such ways that we can just commodify our time and even our emotional community circles, because we can order everything on an app. We can be inside. We can only associate with the people who just know us so well. But I think people really crave their community, to see them and to say, I belong here. I'm not just a guest who someone's like, oh, you know, we're so happy everyone's here today. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad you came to church today. I'm so glad that you're my neighbor. I'm so glad that you come out and rake the leaves with me. And then we can talk about things that I'm a crazy person and I'm saying all this, but you still come out and rake the leaves with me. I'm so glad that it's you. I think everyone has this deep craving to belong in community. And you can also pretend and tell yourself a different story if you're just on the fringe saying, oh, it's too much for me. I do not want to talk to these people. I don't want to have to show up. I think we fool ourselves sometimes into believing that that's what our spirit or our soul needs, because it can be really hard to show up as your full self, especially when you've received negative responses to who you are. Right. Like, no, I'm just going to avoid people because you know what? People are awful. And sometimes they're awful, but we can have a community and we can curate a community and cultivate this kind of deep belonging where you belong. And I'm so glad you're here, because you being here changes everything, right? We've all chosen to be here. So I love that we can highlight these small but deeply meaningful disciplines and practices, and they become authentic. I mean, the passing of the peace, I'm like, whoa, these people are like, diving on each other. They're so happy to see each other.
Yeah.
And other people are like, no, please don't touch me. But right, just saying something can change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's like a practical way that we can make sure that we come out of our shell and see each other when we are in community together in person. We have a couple other practical tips. I just wanted to share, we want to talk a little bit about journaling, but I have this tip of using like a Google form or some other, if you are a techie person and you have like your notes app on your phone, to have a gratitude practice there. I send myself a Google form and I fill it out in the evening before bed, and I try to list 5 things. I try to list something unexpected, or I call it a miracle because I just want to kind of be a little bit over the top like that, something like that happened in my day, and then 5 things I'm grateful for, and I like send it in the Google form. And I never read my answers, but it helps me to practice that before I go to bed. So, we're going to talk a little bit about journaling, and that can be really beautiful, longhand, awesome notebook, perfect pen, and that's like almost like an art. But then sometimes we just want to develop the practice and make sure that we get our brain in the right direction. So my little hot tip is, doing it with tech. So if it only takes you 60 seconds before you turn your light off at night, you still get it done.
Yes, and that's great. I think what matters is just what speaks to you. How can you actually get that done? What's your own language of comfort? We have a practice we dinner together as a family every night, even if it's like 4 o'clock because you got sports on, whatever it is. And we always have this thing with our kids that we do, and we share, Shannon and I share too, like, what's your rosebud and thorn from the day? And there's always this opportunity to say something was hard, something was so great. This is something I'm looking forward to. And then how did those like transform? How did that affect you today? Or what were you thankful for around this experience? Or what was really hard for you? I think those little things keep us kind of grounded in what's out of our control, something that happened to us. And then we kind of share it, and then we can move. We don't just leave it there. So what do we take from this? Like, what's a great lesson? And we try to let the kids like do these, lessons for us. And it's just a little thing that we do, right? We all have something that we do that keeps us attentive to the now, and knowing that we can't change everything, but we can change our own responses to the things that do happen around us. Even things that are so hard and so sad, they'll say something about a kid whose family had a really bad situation, or sometimes all we can do is abide in their suffering, and with gratitude, sometimes all we can do is just abide in the joy, right, that someone else is experiencing, even if they're not here in our community with us, or family who is, in another state. We can still talk about that, and that deep gratitude, right, becomes a part of us and allows us to then go to the next day. Like the Google form, like whatever it is that keeps you in the discipline of knowing that the here and now is what we have, right? And it's so powerful. So we encourage you to think about your own practices, whether it's journaling, like take a walk, go on a journey, get out your app, your notes. I do want to share this really cool guided practice. Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets, and everyone's probably across the world, but she has this really cool poem that's called Gratitude. I'm not going to read the whole poem because it's really, really long, and basically she asks some questions and then she responds to her own questions in that poem. So look it up and read it. But the questions that she asks, I think, allow us to be in touch with our emotions, our own heartbeat, and our own living presence, and then the depths of our humanity. And I think it can be powerful to think about it as our shared humanity, because we're very, very different. Some of us are privileged, some of us are beyond oppressed, some of us see hope, and some of us hopelessness sometimes is our guide. But how do we ask these questions, and then maybe what your own responses would be? So the first is, what do you notice? What do you hear? What do you admire? What astonishes you? What would you like to see again? What is most tender to you? What is most wonderful? And what do you think is happening? What is gratitude? Right? These can be kind of grounding questions that we ask that keeps us attentive to the now. I love your miracle. Like, what's the miracle? Right? What's the hope? What is it about my own body and presence and life that can change something today? Right? So this is a poem has a lot of great, beautiful illustrations and metaphors that allow us to see ourselves as part of something so much bigger, which I think can be the root of gratitude, right? When I realize that I'm this little dot in this big, vast universe of change and loss and beauty, I can find something that points me to the deep roots of my existence, right? Because we are. So I love this. What did you notice? What do you hear? What do you admire? Gives us this opportunity to have awe and amazement, even amidst suffering or struggle or loss.
Right.
So practice some kind of reading, meditation, a guided practice. There's so many apps. There are so many things. Calm app. Just listen to some ocean waves as you're falling asleep. Do something that nurtures your own soul, that moves you from a place of maybe grief and loss or neutrality to a place of gratitude and hope.
Yeah, and taking any of these to a journal, counting our blessings. It sounds so, I mean, we learn about that as little kids, and as we have Thanksgiving, our American Thanksgiving holiday coming up in a couple weeks. But it really is a beautiful practice to notice our enoughness and the enoughness that surrounds us, and be able to feel it in our bodies.
Yes.
Because we do need to be shored up at this time, full of gratitude, so that we can be resilient. And I love the progression you're inviting, that the resilience then can lead to resistance, to empire, to oppression, to the things that may be to come. But for today and every day, we stay grounded in right now and where we are now, and the practice of gratitude. Beautiful.
You. I'm going to leave us with this blessing by another of our favorites, Jan Richardson. And she has this great, in the vein of miracles, angel Thelma, right, who comes to her in times of grief and loss. But this is a blessing out of that miracle that shows up that I think will resonate with us. Bless them who wait with us, who labor with us, who cry out with us. Bless them who know our limits, who push us beyond them, who see us through them. Bless them who call us to our strengths, who tend us in our weakness, who dress each ragged wound. Bless them who laugh in the face of convention, who weep for our own pain, who bid us come and live. We hope that you receive the blessings of your own experiences and gratitude this week, that you are surrounded by beauty, and if you forget that you reach out to someone who can remind you how whole and beautiful and wonderful that you are. As you enter this season of Thanksgiving, whether you're going home to a table of festivities or finding a journey in solitude or loss, please know that you are beloved and that there is a community here, that you belong here at Countryside. And if you're not here, that you will reach out to us to let us know that we are here for you and we want to be a support to you. So with gratitude, we send you off this week and hope you have a great one, and we'll see you here next week. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.